Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Dynasty Underdog. I'm your host, Ryan Dawkins. With me tonight, Billy Beeman and Jake Corbloom. What's going on, Billy?
Not much, dude. Just season winding up, getting ready for the playoffs here. Got another great sheet. Excited for another good show. How you doing, Jake?
Dude, doing well. Thank you guys for having me.
Of course.
All right.
All right, let's hop into news, some nonsense. I guess quickly, Trevor Lawrence is going to be on IR after apparently having to get surgery on his left shoulder that nobody really knew about, which comes after him getting the dog shit knocked out of him on Sunday and his offender getting a 3-game suspension.
Mac Jones sell window?
Yeah,
always.
Yeah.
Always.
I mean, if you can, yeah. I mean, honestly, right now, like you might be able to get something for him because people like are maybe down a quarterback. Maybe someone was rocking Trevor Lawrence and Taysom Hill was like their 2 quarterback. I don't know. There's
Dak Prescott. I don't know. There's a slew.
Yeah,
of
there's a
them
situation where you could probably get something. Yeah. All right. Speaking of Taysom Hill, though, Taysom Hill. So is a Taysom Hill boom and massive bust a trend we could have gotten in front, or does the hope and pray mentality live on? Well, I think everybody knows, should know Taysom Hill got injured severely. Honestly, we could have, at the age we are, we could have been in the same high school together. He's old. So I would say that this probably means he's probably done.
Oh no, he's never done. Taysom's never done. But
yeah, I guess you're right.
He's not, never. But to the question, I do think it's something we could have gotten in front of. Like,
sure,
this is a guy who at the beginning of the season was worth literally nothing. And then, we were just talking about it before the show. I didn't really see a ton of this, but his value rose substantially to close to like second round pick value, apparently, which is just outrageous. So, could we have gotten ahead of this as managers of Taysom Hill? Probably should have been able to. Like, if you rostered him, would you have felt comfortable getting rid of him for a third or 2/3? Probably not, given the points that he was scoring, but you have to come to terms with that as a dynasty player. Like, there's certain assets that, regardless of what the points in the production are, they need to be moved for something, especially given your situation. Like, if you're a contender, top contender, go ahead, hold on to him. Who cares, right? But outside of that, it's like you got to find a way to get something for him. And this is a guy who I feel like even myself like fell into the trap of like, if you're, again, not like a bye week type contender team, like you should be looking to get rid of him no matter what, right? Like, see if somebody can take him off your hands for something. Otherwise, you're going to have a dead asset on your team once again, like you do now. You want to add anything, Jake?
No, yeah, that's exactly kind of where my head was at with adding this to the sheet and really kind of honing in on this almost like anti-redraft mentality. Like we're so confined to this mentality, it seems like this year. I don't know, 2024 just feels like everyone really wants to contend, everyone really wants to compete, but like we're playing a different game, and it's really important to elongate your team's ability to win. Now, if you're driving so much value in the points that are being scored by Taysom Hill in your team, probably need those additional picks if you can grab them. And if he's kind of a bonus to your team, I'd even almost say to the opposite of that. It's like, if he's a bonus, maybe acquire some additional draft capital if you can. I guess my biggest thing is just making sure that we don't lose sight of the end all goal, which is to win, but it's also to win with the idea that you're able to sustain the ability to win. And I think there's no reason to ever invest highly in assets like Taysom Hill, even with their incredibly high upside. It's just something that I've always felt. And I know it's probably not a super common idea, but I've seen too many conversations, I feel like, over the last 3 weeks of, go out and go buy Taysom Hill because he's affordable and will get you points. I get the ideology. I just don't think that it necessarily fits every single build.
True. I mean, I have him in one spot, and he's been in my super flex for like 4 weeks. And honestly, I don't have any other options besides, other skilled position player. And I've been happy with it. So at no point was I really considering selling him because I'm contending. So I think that's why he's still on my roster. But definitely if you had other options, seeing that type of player producing the way he has been producing would have been a good chance to move off him. And now you just can't. So it is what it is.
Truly.
All right, Billy, Age Cliff update. What do you got?
Yeah, this is just really. I mean, we'll see how long we spend on it, but just thinking about the running backs right now, the top 4 running backs in points per game. So 4 of the top 5 running backs are average age like 28. It's Derrick Henry, Joe Mixon, Kamara, and Saquon. Thank you, Saquon. And so I was just wondering if we are going to reconsider the way we look at the age cliff and look at running backs in the future. Going into next year, are we going to be more interested in some of the aging vets who are a little undervalued, or will they be less undervalued at that point? But will we be interested, I guess, in holding on to these guys a little bit longer than we typically would have the past couple of years? And I mean, I'll leave it there. There's definitely some data we can reach back to, like the age cliff stuff we pulled a while back, which, I do think leaves you thinking that you can rely on these guys a little bit longer than maybe we think sometimes in the dynasty community, as we want to get off of, age and get younger. But I don't know. Any thoughts on that? Anybody?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's still stupid to say, but like process over results. I think there's enough data there to let us know that like this is unusual. Just probably shouldn't be happening. But I do believe that like Saquon Barkley, due to injuries and stuff like that, like I don't think there's like a ton of tread on his wheels still. So I think that kind of helps the situation he's in with a better O-line than he's ever had before. The one that really is shocking is Derrick Henry, but even you've seen him slow down quite a bit over the last few weeks too. Yeah, like it's not gonna, for me personally, it's not gonna change how I view the older running backs. Like it's a trap. I think the results we're seeing this year is going to lead people to make some bad decisions on investing in older running backs again. But I'm not willing to take that bet.
Yeah, I guess in that same vein, you're right. And also to you, Billy, like, do you think that we'll see in startup drafts almost in a revaluation of aging running backs where they'll be drafted at higher values than they ever were before in, let's say, 2025?
Yes. Not ever were before, but like definitely more than they have been in recent years or in the past year or two. I definitely think that we're going to see a market reaction to this kind of thing. And also I think like some of the data does like indicate that, again, like the guys who are old and exceeding expectations or, leading the pack or both of those things, they're elite type talents, elite type players. And like we see that, we did break it down even to that kind of production level, and going into like, career year 8, 9, or ages 28 to 31 still, but really, 30, we can say, you're still seeing the elite guys average above 15 points per game. And so if they're really good, like it seems like they can defy father time a little bit, and so maybe that's where we alter our thinking a little bit. And if they're still being undervalued, then yeah, I think they're worth going after at a pretty high rate. And yeah, I think we just need to do a little bit better of a job, or not better of a job, but I think a more thorough of a job dissecting and identifying, which players kind of fit this this kind of player profile. And yeah, except for Gurley. Yeah, I think the health concerns there, the medicals on that one were pretty telling, and we could have gotten a little bit ahead of it maybe, honestly, at the end there. But yeah, any final thoughts on this? Anybody?
No, the only thing I will say is, like, I guess originally to Uriah's point is that we do know that the data doesn't say that this is going to happen to all of those running backs. And to your point, Billy, the identification process is incredibly important. But I do think that if you are unsure, right, like if you are unable to identify, it's always better to go the process route and potentially lose out on, that slight extended window of value just so that you can get out at the right time is kind of the way that I see it. So, it's all about energy and effort, as Billy likes to always put it. It is really important
Effort and commitment.
That's what it is, and commitment. Yeah, I don't know what that word means. But like, I think it's really important to be able to identify that individually. And if you aren't willing to put forth that effort, then understand where that age cliff lies, and then get out of those assets when you can, especially if your league mates aren't necessarily buying into, that type of hoopla or propaganda.
Hoopla. Yeah, and like I will say, to Uriah's point, on average, typically, things start dipping down well below 15 points per game around, age 28, 29. And so it's true. On the whole, we don't want to just like be going after aging running backs because of what we just saw. But I think if we're looking at the top guys and we're thinking, oh, well, they're 27, we got to get out of these guys. We got to sell, or they're sitting there, still in the 8th, 9th, 10th round of your startups next year, that kind of valuation, then yeah, I think we should probably be attacking that kind of player. So it's just something I wanted to think about, because I do think we're going to see a overreaction at large by the market, especially in startups like Jake kind of hinted at the beginning. We'll see them, I think, a lot of the older ones fly up the board, but maybe we do see a couple of them still falling behind, and we can take advantage of that. But in general, for the future, when the dust settles, I do think that, the high quality, the high end talents can still be pretty useful, as they age. And so we don't need to shy away from them necessarily. Like many of us probably have on like the Barclays and stuff like that over the last couple of years, trying to really get out when situation improved, and age doesn't seem to be a problem.
There's actually, in that window, I was thinking, just because of the age parallels, someone like a Zeke, who we definitely saw that decline happen right around the 26 mark for him. Like, I guess from a process perspective, like how can we differentiate someone like Zeke, who obviously in his first 5 years in the NFL was elite, to having, that year 6 kind of decline? Where do we kind of stand with someone like him? And you're right, I promise that's not like a dig at Zeke. I personally have a lot of respect for him. It's just more so the first guy who came to my mind. There's, I'm sure, many other. DeMarco Murray had similar. Garrett Blunt, Leonard Fournette.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, he would have been a guy who, just based on like the usage, would have been somebody who I'd be a little worried about. Just like he had multiple 300 carry seasons, early in his career. He had three of them. He had 2016, 18, and 19. Like the tread on the tires was so significant after the first couple of years, and you could kind of see his body wearing down. Whereas like comping it to like a Joe Mixon, or even what's the other guy that's in Green Bay?
Josh Jacobs.
Not a huge fan of, but like both of those guys, just eye test, have more juice than a Zeke did. I think when you could see it, kind of the wheels start falling off, And so I think part of it is that identification, and it is going to be like the eye test, the athleticism is still there. But yeah, part of it is going to be the tread on the tires for me too. If somebody's getting worked like Zeke, which none of these guys get worked like Zeke these days, then I think that'll be part of the identification process. But that's not necessarily what we're seeing. A guy like Joe Mixon has never had a 300 carry season, or he's only had one that was even close. So these guys are just different, completely different players in terms of usage and where their bodies have been taken. So that's what I think of when I think of Zeke in relation to this conversation.
All right. I think before we move on to the Untold Rookie review, we need to shout out Jake and his mustard colored hoodie. Loving it.
Mustard.
Every time I hear that word, that's all I think of.
I mean, it looks mustard on my screen. So shout out.
It is.
It's beautiful.
I appreciate it. Thanks for the shout out. I wore it in front of Joe, actually. So shout out love to Joe if you saw it live in person. I didn't have the balls to wear Giants colors to the Steeler game.
Oh, I see what you're doing there.
No,
All
I
right.
think that was good. I thought you were repping the home squad there, but no, I guess not. You just had to show up in disguise,
Just in case.
undercover.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
All right. Untold rookie review and story. What do you guys got here?
Yeah,
What's on the
I threw
brain?
this on the sheet. This was all me. This was all me. I put a couple of guys down who I think we collectively had some conversations about during the off season, whether that was through profile reviews or just general conversations around athletes that I think the Twitterverse talked a lot about. And I kind of wanted to bring them back up and just kind of see what we thought about their performances over the first 13 weeks. Some good, some bad, some shit, some mediocre, some maybe haven't really played at all. And I think just kind of providing providing a little bit more context to what's going on, maybe we can resurface whether or not there's any future value there for any of these players. Because I think this is kind of the great time to start buying, if you're a rebuilding team, into these types of talents if they haven't really hit. So from the very top, because I wanted to start off positive, I was thinking of Bo Nix. I think Bo Nix is a prime example of a player that a lot of us were against. Me personally, I was very, very strongly against Bo Nix. I will openly state that. And I think Uriah was more on the positive side based off of a lot of the conversations that we had in comparison, just more positive than me. I was basically burying his career down into a grave. And so I don't know, what are your two thoughts of just kind of like where things have landed for Bo and what you've seen from his general performance? Is the statistical element matching with the actual performance itself, or is there a little bit of mismatch there?
With Bo Nix, yes, Bo Nix is funny. I feel like I was in the middle of you too, where it was like, I kind of remember having conversations about like, I feel, I should be taking him at the 112, the 201, but I don't want to, like that kind of conversation, which is basically the Justin Herbert conversation all over again, that you might not have been necessarily in the dynasty community for, Jake, at the time, but it was so very familiar to like this. And just again, like I don't have enough Bo Nix shares because I just didn't bite the bullet and take the quarterback early second, late first, whatever, where you should just be taking the quarterbacks. Like it's not the most guaranteed position. Yes, like we see guys in the first round fail all the time, but man, they retain a hell of a lot of value. And if they hit like this, I mean, you get such a lucrative asset on your team. And so that's kind of just in terms of storytelling and how I think about Bo Nix. I just think about it as once again, the community kind of failing to realize where the value really lies, and that there was kind of a little hidden gem there for pretty cheap. And many of us kind of let him slip away again, let the quarterback slip away again. That's kind of what I feel about Bo Nix.
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's just, I've said it, I don't know, probably 24 times on this pod. Like, if a quarterback is drafted in the NFL in the first round, he probably should not be the first round of your rookie drafts. I remember watching Bo Nix was, God, I always forget. Was he at Auburn?
Auburn, yeah.
For a little bit, yeah. Terrible. I mean, I'm not the best quarterback evaluator, but I was like, this guy's trash. So I kind of just always held on to that. I was never big on Bo Nix. I liked his landing spot, and I liked the narrative behind how they selected him, and that they were purposeful in trying to acquire this guy over JJ McCarthy and such. I should have probably ended up with a share of him here and there. I think like maybe I had an opportunity to take Jonathan Brooks, or I could have went for the quarterback at the 112, and I went with Jonathan Brooks. I'm just happy for the guy. I don't really have much to say. It's like he's balling out, and I'm happy. It's just kind of like Drake May. Like it doesn't always happen this way, and it's kind of a risk to take quarterback when you know that typically only maybe 2 out of 4 or 2 out of 5 actually will hit. This year it seems to be a little bit better. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm in disbelief at how well he's playing.
Yeah, I mean, I would say
I didn't believe that he would be able to do this.
Yeah, just quickly from a film perspective, he looks great. Like he really does just look very decisive, and the arm strength looks better than you thought it would be. So he's able to get, balls in places that you wouldn't quite expect, down the field a little bit better, fitting in tight windows, those kind of things. So yeah, man, like you got to be encouraged by what you've seen thus far, and it's pretty sustained success against different levels of competition. And yeah, you can only say that it's encouraging, I think, for the kid.
Definitely. The only thing I would like to add to the film review aspect is one of the biggest things that I've noticed about him is that he's incredibly intelligent from a reading defenses pre-snap perspective, which I think he's actually at a higher level than some of the top 3 talents in the draft, because those are the only ones that we can compare him to, unfortunately. So we haven't seen Michael Penix and we haven't seen JJ McCarthy. And so the one thing that there was a play, I think it was this past weekend, or it might have been 2 weekends ago. I forgot who they were playing, but basically it was a strong side blitz. He noticed that the blitz was picked up immediately, and the actual play that was being called was actually going to put him in greater danger. Instead of actually audibling, which was really an interesting decision, he didn't audible. The right guard popped back out and covered the middle as if they were going to be blitzed from the middle, but they weren't. So they actually got even like quadruple strong side blitzed. He ends up taking his first step as soon as he received the ball was to his left. And then he took 2 more steps to his left and then basically sidearmed it to, I think it was Cortland Sutton for like a 10-yard completion. And it was just incredibly great game knowledge to know that that was the situation, and also to not show the defense that he was aware of it. Because I feel like that was actually able to create the mismatch on the wide receiver, because if he would have audibled out, they would have known that there was a change, right? Yeah. So they would have countered his audible. Instead, he didn't, and ended up being able to counter it with his own physicality and dynamicism. There we go. Dynamism.
Yeah, and like you said, the game knowledge to also know what's happening. He knew, be able to execute the off-script play to get to the on-script play. You know what I mean? Like,
exactly.
That's pretty impressive work by a young guy, and I think you see that play in and play out where the recognition before the snap and after the snap, it's there, and that's just something you can't really teach, but also was something that he kind of came in, and that was kind of his resume. Was he's the older guy who is going to know this shit, and he's coming in with with what's the coach's name or whatever,
Sean Payton.
Who's going to have a scheme that is suited for this kind of quarterback. So we shouldn't be all that surprised that it's working out. I think we just more surprised that he's able to execute in this way this early on. So yeah, that's I guess we were pretty long-winded on Bo Nix, but I do think that was worth reviewing a little bit because it's something that we get wrong every year, I feel like, in these drafts.
Definitely. Well, the next one that I put down was Luke McCaffrey, the other McCaffrey.
The other
white meat. So I didn't realize the
babies.
Oh
my god!
I did not realize the double entendre there. Okay. Anyway, so Luke McCaffrey, I would say he was a pretty mixed bag coming into rookie drafts across the dynasty community. A lot of people loved, almost as weird as it sounds, the bloodline. Other people didn't really love the talent because he was a transitory athlete in the sense that he wasn't necessarily a wide receiver coming into the NFL. He only really had 2 years of being a wide receiver under his belt. And so there was definitely a lot of concern. Going into the actual NFL, though, we actually saw relatively significant usage in the first couple of weeks of the season. And since then, it's basically plummeted into the teens in terms of snap share. What are your 2 thoughts of what's going on with Luke McCaffrey?
I mean, from a film perspective, I haven't really dug into his film, but it just doesn't seem like he's the most dynamic player in the group, or at least that he's not able to execute that way right now. Like, he always seems to be pretty sharp on the routes and everything, but you're just not, every catch he's made is pretty much gone to the ground and nothing else has been done with it. And a lot of them at the 1 yard line, but still, I'm just wondering if that's impacting things and they're wanting to just get the playmakers involved, the guys who are actually scoring points and contributing in the yak department, that kind of thing. But yeah, I don't know. Like, he looks fine. He's just kind of a small dude, and he's not like the greatest athlete ever. So I don't know if it's ever going to work out for him. He's not his brother, and he's not his dad, unfortunately. But hopefully he can develop. Like, I don't know what else to say. I don't see the pop there that you really wanted to see early on, and I'm wondering if that's kind of affecting his ability to get on the field.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of, I don't know, just like analytically, I guess. I didn't watch any of his college tape or anything like that. I think a lot of it came with the bloodline, people like that. Yeah, and then landing spots like, okay, well, you got Terry McLaurin there, maybe John Dotson, Zach Ertz is old. He should have opportunity, but I mean, he's not really a target earner in his career, and he's still not in the NFL, and I'm not really shocked.
That's fair. Are either of you trying to buy at any point right now that he's now down to basically a fourth?
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't think I'm like individually going out to try to buy Luke McCaffrey, but if he's on someone's roster and I'm making a trade, like, I might try to just get him thrown in there as a throw-in, as it were. Just because I do think that there's still potential there. The wide receiver core is pretty thin. He could definitely show out over the last couple weeks of the season or develop into year two. So I wouldn't mind throwing him in, but I'm not like seeking him out and trying to trade for anything else other than a 4th round pick, maybe. And even then, it's like, do I just want to see what I get in the 4th next year? Yeah.
Same boat, Uriah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any shares, and I'm not looking to acquire.
It's crazy. I shout out to Josh.
He's not on the market right now for any Luke McCaffrey.
Just my feelings haven't changed since April.
Yeah, same. He was the type of player that I definitely did acquire, hoping that someone else would be more interested in him. And I think I had 2 shares, and I sold both of them for seconds early in the season or early off season. Got pretty lucky, and I don't have any more shares. I'm going to keep it that way. I'm going to pair the next 2 together. They kind of live in similar tumultuous relationships with the dynasty community. AD Mitchell, Xavier Worthy, former Texas wide receivers. 2 completely different profiles of wide receiver too. So I think that's kind of important. But given kind of where we've seen their usage, I think we've seen kind of a nice little steady uptick for Xavier Worthy. We're starting to see a little bit more targets per game. General usage seems to be going in the right direction. AD Mitchell in a kind of similar range, more so down to probably wide receiver health around him. So when there's someone missing like a Pittman or a Downs, AD Mitchell is typically being used more. Are we concerned about either of these assets in terms of how they're performing currently based off of where they were being drafted? So Xavier Worthy somewhere around the 108 range, probably in your rookie draft, and AD Mitchell somewhere probably anywhere between the 203 to the 301, probably, depending on your leagues, if you're 12-team Superflex. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. AD, I'll hop in real quick if you don't mind.
Yeah, you go ahead.
Uriah. AD Mitchell, like his production is going to be a lot more inconsistent just because of the quarterback play there. And so I think that's part of it, as well as the injury stuff. I mean, Josh Downs wasn't there this past week, and I don't think he did a thing. Going against a pretty good secondary, granted, but still. Xavier Worthy, though, in such a good situation, doing as good a job as he can of playing mid. And so it's not just like he's not living up to the boom player necessarily, for one, but also like you can see the missteps literally where he's stepping out of bounds right on the sideline, like multiple times throughout the season on big plays that, they're trying to move the ball downfield, and it's now 4th down instead of a big 3rd down conversion where the ball's in his hands and all he needed to do was keep his feet in bounds. And so he's just not as refined as you'd like him to be. I mean, that definitely can get right over time. And if his value is dipped enough, I'd definitely be interested in getting in on some Xavier Worthy. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of his game necessarily, but I think that he's shown enough year one where you can get a little excited about like the development, over time with Mahomes. It's not like he's out here and he can't do anything, but he's just really raw and not able to get the job done the way that you'd like it to be done. But he catches most everything thrown his way. The targets are increasing. It's just, I think, the NFL kind of stuff that he needs to do a better job at, the fundamental stuff. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think, Uriah?
Yeah, I'm pretty much right there with you. Seeing AD Mitchell getting outplayed by like Alec Pierce is troublesome. But going back after Jake had mentioned the range in which AD Mitchell was getting drafted, my memory served me wrong. I thought he was going a little bit sooner. So it's not so bad. I mean, he's definitely worth just hanging on to and seeing if Anthony Richardson and that offense could get AD Mitchell the ball more. If I had him, I'd be a little worried that he's not going to pan out. Xavier Worthy's one that's like, it's really good because, we always have like the film guys, the analytic guys, and we don't always agree on certain players. But I think kind of across the board, like everyone kind of thought Xavier Worthy was a good player, or at least we knew he was in college from both words. So I'm kind of surprised that he has had such a slow start. But I think, that's kind of been like an Andy Reid type thing with rookie wide receivers going back to his full tenure. I don't think that any rookie wide receiver he's ever had has had like such a major role. So just to see that his role's increasing there is a little exciting. If I had to choose between the other two that I'd be investing in on, say, like a quote unquote discount, I'm still interested in Xavier Worthy. This is kind of a weird way to do how to look at things when it comes to like fading players in the rookie draft. But historically, like the fastest guys at the combine, wide receivers, they just haven't panned out. And I know that's like ignoring all the other good stuff, and like you probably shouldn't do that. But it is what it is. Like these guys are super fast, and like the really super fast guys just don't typically work out. Like AD Mitchell, Xavier Worthy. It's like, holy shit, they ran fast. Like people like that, and I like that with Worthy. But Worthy had a really good analytic profile, and film guys seem to love him a lot too. So I was interested in Xavier Worthy. I didn't grab any shares. I don't have any shares of any of these four people that we're talking about at the moment. But as it stands today, I think I would be interested in trying to get some Worthy before the season ends.
And just last thing, sorry to cut you off, and I'll let you go after this. But last thing on Xavier Worthy, and it's more of like a kinesiology type thing. But it feels like, for as dynamic and as fast as he is, he's kind of uncoordinated. Like with the ball in his hands, he's actually almost better without the ball in his hands, where he like runs pretty crisp routes and does all that. But once he gets the ball in his hands, he almost looks like he's flailing around in a way, or that he's not just in full control of his body. And I think that also kind of is apparent on those sideline catches and stuff, where he just doesn't have full control of all his extremities and everything and where it's going. And I think, that could just be like he's not super confident in his, game right now. He's not up with the game speed of the NFL, that kind of thing. And maybe over time that develops a little bit better, where he just needs to get a little stronger too, and just more comfortable in his frame in the NFL. And that'll help things out a bit. And I do think he can build into his frame a little bit. So maybe that's what happens. But just like a note from watching him, something that I think may be impacting his game, both a little bit before the catch, but mostly after the catch, or at the catch point and after the catch. But yeah, I'll leave you with that, Jake.
Yeah, no, I think that's really helpful, because that's kind of the same path that I was going to go into and bring up. I think it was a conversation on the Discord. Funny enough, I want to say it was Dan, but I'm not positive. Shout out to NFS Football. Don't know what your name is anywhere else. But
Scottish Nitros.
Yeah, so one of the big things that I've noticed, and other people have noticed, is that I think specifically with like overly fast athletes, right? Players that we tend to see like really, really high levels of speed from. I think there's, to also Billy's point, like this lack of coordination that exists, almost like their brain is unable to keep up with the speed in which some of their body parts are moving. And I think that has a lot to do with that kinesiology aspect that Billy's bringing up, is like the ability to run really fast is really helpful. But if your brain can't keep up with how fast your legs are moving and your arms don't move at the same speed, like it doesn't end up resulting in truly an athlete. It just results in a person who can like run incredibly quickly, which in other sports is athletic and is really helpful. In this sport at a really high level, I don't think is really going to be that productive, and was truly one of my biggest criticisms of him coming into the NFL as well. Same thing with Troy Franklin, who is also incredibly fast, is just these guys who tend to be, I think, for lack of better words, very linear with regards to their emotions and movements. When their brain is asking them to do other external things that they're not used to, they end up being very struggled in the development process. And so he does seem like a player who I think if we can be a little bit more patient with, there might be an extended window of opportunity from. I happen to have 2 shares of him. I don't see myself selling unless someone comes back at probably what I acquired. Kind of similar to what happened with me with JSN for the last 2 years. It's like I wasn't going to sell unless I received, I think I gave up like a 107 or a 106 for him. That's kind of what I was aiming for. And I'm okay with that process. I don't think that Xavier Worthy is remotely as talented as JSN, and I definitely shouted that out in the offseason. I think I was pretty much a doomer on him. So it's weird that I do have 2 shares. I did think that his rookie year would be significantly more productive and kind of similar to almost the first game that we saw him play, right? He had 2 big boom plays, and that was kind of the excitement that I was hoping was going to exist moving forward. Unfortunately, that was my only out and I missed it. But that's kind of why we're here too, is to think through that process. Any other thoughts on either of those guys? Cool. I think we exhausted that. Let's talk about 3 running backs who kind of are sitting in almost identical buckets. They all were drafted somewhere in the second round of your rookie startup drafts, if you were playing super flex. Blake Corum, Jalen Wright, and Trey Benson, all in different situations to what I think a lot of people thought was to create bigger roles for themselves. And not a single one of them has a relatively large role going into week 14. Why do we think that's occurred? Do we think that we maybe like overshot and thought too poorly of the pre-existing situations? And by that, I mean, Kyron Williams slander was pretty high in the offseason, not necessarily by us, but I think across the entire board. James Conner slander was definitely strong amongst the Twitterverse, and Devon Achane and Raheem Mostert, who hasn't had a very good year, but yet still continues to take snaps away from Jalen Wright. So I know they're all 3 different situations, but I don't know. Did either of you think that they would have maybe slightly more productive rookie season so far?
Yes. I certainly. Yeah. Go ahead, Uriah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just in general, I mean, I thought for sure Blake Corum would end up with some sort of split, more so than he has. Obviously, he's had some games where he's got more of a split, and with Kyron mostly being the lead back there, and then Trey Benson. I thought with Connor, he's getting older, he's going to get a shot to at least see what he's doing, and Jalen Wright being super fast and kind of just fitting the build there. I thought all 3 of these guys we would have seen a whole lot more by now. But here's the thing, I don't want to see. I'm looking at my taxi squads. Man, I really like this. In April, I thought these guys, okay, these guys, I'm gonna call them up at some point in the season, and I just haven't. But I try to think about what Chuba Hubbard has done since his rookie season, because his rookie season was terrible, and I think we all kind of liked him. Was it Oklahoma? I think so.
Yeah,
I think
he was a Debbie darling before he injured his knee back in Oklahoma. Yeah, he was going to be number 1 running back.
Exactly. So his first year is just was not great, right? And his competition was also not great. So it's kind of had written him off. And then since then, he's actually been good. He's been spectacular this year. So I'm wondering about these guys. This is kind of different topic. I don't want to move off of any of these guys after kind of a failed first year based on what we've seen with Chuba Hubbard. I think that there's something there and probably worth just hanging on to.
Yeah. How many Chubas are out there, though? I mean, that specific situation, not a ton, but there's also quite a few lower drafted running backs that pop up and are pretty productive. And these guys aren't even low drafted necessarily. Some of them, I mean, Jalen Wright may be the lowest of the 3, but Corum and Benson aren't really, they actually have decent DC to keep, the investment there by the team. So these are all three guys who I think are assets you can buy heading into the offseason. You can get off of contenders right now who are looking for actual production for, get your sincere McCormick plus some guy for, Jalen Wright or something like that. Like you could probably swing something like, I'm just throwing out a random name, but like there's definitely a ton of sincere McCormick's probably not going to do the trick, but there's guys out there for sure that that you can move for these players at a much lower cost than you'd have to get them before. I'm sure you're in like the third round pick range for probably a Corum for any of these guys, honestly. Maybe not Corum, but Wright and Benson definitely have a stigma on them, I'm sure, of like no production and no usage. So I think I'm most interested in Corum and Benson. Wright, I think, has an uphill battle, but he's going to probably be the direct backup next year, so that's helpful. I'd be interested in all these guys.
Yeah, I think you can even probably throw in perennially injured Marshawn Lloyd into this conversation of like that range of running back just teetering outside the second round, touching the third round of your your rookie draft. But all of that to be said, we've seen nothing of Marshawn Lloyd because he's been injured the entire season. So why even talk about him? I think the two of you covered all three of those players really well. So I'm happy to kind of move on. The last one, because we haven't covered this position yet, is tight end. And this was a really interesting one because these two guys basically would go back to back in a lot of rookie drafts this past offseason. We're talking about Jatavion Sanders on Carolina and Ben Sinnott. And, for us here, I think in the DU verse, especially when Billy and I were watching the tape, I was truly baffled at how good Ben Sinnott was. But we know that there is the world's biggest tight end cock block, also known as Zach Ertz, who happens to play in Washington. Now, one of the things I put in parentheses here, early roles are they important to scope out when we're trying to value these individual players depending on their positions? And I think for me, just before you guys kind of chime in, I do think that they're really important, especially at the tight end position. And the reality was that JT Sanders didn't really have any true competition except for Tommy piece of shit Tremble to play against, to vie for snaps. But Ben Sinnott, like I said, perennial cock blocker, Zach Ertz, is known to be there in the way of every single rookie tight end, but by all means has helped develop some incredible tight end talent, right? So we've seen, year 2 breakouts of Trey McBride, year 3 breakout of Dallas Goedert. There's definitely a positive trajectory that we still might see from these types of talents. But do you think we could have maybe approached the acquisition cost of a Ben Sinnott and a JT Sanders slightly differently in the offseason?
I think so. Go ahead, Uriah. Go ahead. Sorry.
I'll just be quick with it. I was just say not in your rookie drafts because ADP is what it is, right? So like, if there's a player that you wanted, like I know Billy's really high on Sinnott, he probably has a ridiculous share of him, but you have to spend what the market is.
A shrine at this point.
Yeah, and honestly, I think he's going to be right about it. I think next year we'll see more Ben Sinnott. So. It's just understanding what the player has to overcome to become that dude. It goes back to the 3 running backs we just talked about before, where we're banking on, hey, we know they're not going to be the starter right away, but we're just hoping father time or talent or whatever will take over it. And I think that's kind of what we're looking at with Ben Sinnott and JT Sanders on the flip side saying, hey, he's the guy. And until he got hurt, he was looking like a really good buy at the time. He probably still is a really good buy, probably even more so now.
Yeah. I don't know if we could have approached them in the draft that much different other than like I was drafting Sinnott a little high for sure. So I think maybe you could have just let him fall and taken the shares that came to you really. JT Sanders, I think, was falling into the third quite a bit. He was probably being overdrafted sometimes a little bit, which I mean, is fine, I guess. Looking back, it wasn't really that big of that big of a deal either way, whether you let them fall or whether you went and picked them up, kind of in the same range at this point. But Senate, yeah, like I would have liked to see a little bit more out of him anyway, even though, Ertz is in the way. That said, you go back and look at Trey McBride's season early before, I believe Ertz actually got injured even in his rookie season down the stretch. And so that's when he started to break out a little bit. But early on, you saw the same stuff that you're seeing with Senate, where it's, one catch, two catches, those kind of things, not much there, though you did see more, I think, out of Trey McBride early on. And Trey McBride is obviously one of the premier tight ends in the league. So that's to be expected. So yeah, that said, I think, I'm not I'm not going to shy too far away from Senate. I do think I might end up adding some shares over the course of the offseason for really cheap. Like I imagine, unless he starts to turn it on here, or if there's a Ertz injury or something and he gets himself some playing time, I imagine he's going to be around that 4th round value range over the offseason, to be honest. And I'll be a buyer at that. Yeah.
Yes.
And I will say, like, to the early roles important to scope. Like, I do think early roles are important, but I think they're less important for tight end. Like, and obviously the situation and the context matters so much for that position. And so, I mean, I think we're talking through that pretty much here, but I just wanted to kind of throw my 2 cents in there about that part of it.
That's me throwing 2 pennies. Okay. Well, I think that covered it. I wanted to just really talk through some of these rookie narratives and where things have kind of led us, and whether or not we're still in or out on some of those guys. And I think that was a relatively productive conversation. So thank you for entertaining me.
No, yeah, I like it. That was a good
one. All right, next one: exposing ourselves, our trade selves. As they say. So
I like that. That's good.
I think Jake has an update on trading tendencies work, and then I think we'll go over some of the best and worst trades that we've made this year, and just kind of talk about how we feel about them.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to just update everyone on, because we talked about it last week. I think it was last week. I was trying to do some work to better understand some of the trading tendencies across the DU leagues. Unfortunately, most of the data that I was acquiring from was through Dynasty Daddy. And unfortunately, with Dynasty Daddy, not unfortunately, but one of the quirks within Dynasty Daddy is that the data that's being pulled for the individual players' values is of the exact date that you're pulling the data. So there's no way for me to do like a mass pull of, let's say, all of the players' value for the start of the 2023 season or something like that. Instead, I would have to go in and then search the individual player, pull up their actual value, and then bring it back in. It's just too time consuming for me right now. Probably maybe an off-season project that I'll be able to do, but I just wanted to kind of give an update to everyone to just let everyone know, this is something that I do want to continue to work on, because I do think that we can maybe learn a little bit more about how different types of teams are trading and impacting their leagues. But as of right now, not necessarily going to be a priority project for me. So just wanted to provide that update before we jumped into our best and worst trades. And I also wanted us to kind of think through some of the process that we applied to this, because that's kind of where I think we will learn the most from ourselves. And with that, we'll talk about my worst trade I think I did this year. It was Pickens and Knicks for Garrett Wilson. So funny enough, in this league, I had drafted Bo Nix in what we have. It's a supplemental draft, actually. So it's a guillotine league. So some of the teams end up getting, you lose them every year. And so you get a mix of vets and rookies in the draft. I really tried to value taking rookie quarterbacks in this draft, knowing that I had traded away, because my team was safe in the year before, Matt Stafford. So I didn't really have a QB2, and I had JJ McCarthy and Bo Nix. And I was like, well, since I have both of them in the offseason, I was like, what's a great way for me to actually improve and make my wide receiver room slightly more elite? And so I moved from Pickens to what I thought was a pretty big upgrade to Garrett Wilson. Aaron Rodgers is going to be healthy. Anyway, I think the general process here was totally fine in terms of like how I worked through it, until I really kind of honed in on the fact that I was devaluing the way that the league was. So it's a 14-team super flex league. Like, I should be valuing quarterback significantly more heavily.
Mhm.
And I've put myself in a situation, if you can do the math here, my QB2 was JJ McCarthy. I had no QB2. So God forbid you try and survive in a guillotine league with one quarterback whose name was Justin Herbert, and his first 5 weeks were literal booty cheeks. I'm sitting in 4th place right now, so I feel relatively proud of the work that I've done. But I will say that this was a really terrible trade because of me not understanding the actual league dynamics. And I think the reason I added this one in here, because I've made some other really terrible trades, is to really understand, like, when you are so used to playing in isolated leagues and so many of them have overlapping either scoring systems, roster systems, or just general ideologies are relatively similar. If you're in something else, pay significantly more attention to that league and its nuances so that you don't to start thinking of values the same across all of them. And I found that that was my issue specifically in this league. Like, I know for a fact that I devalued Bo Nix, regardless of what I thought of him. I just devalued him so much in a basically start 28 quarterback league. It would be significantly different if it was a start 24 league, just because of, the fact that there's an additional 8 starting quarterbacks that are more available. So something to just kind of add on to. Any comments from either of you about that?
I mean, I wonder how you would have felt if Garrett Wilson actually panned out to be Garrett Wilson. You know what I mean? Like, because like the idea was you were getting like a very premium asset for the 2 that you were moving. Like, obviously the results really, really shade the idea of this original trade, because like if Bo Nix wasn't as good and Garrett Wilson was what we thought he was going to be, then you might feel okay about the trade still. You know what I mean? Just given the dynasty value that you would have had. But I think given the context of like, the 14 team and the quarterback thing, like that matters so much that yes, I agree. Like, even looking back, like you should have been a little bit more hesitant to move 2 for 1 like this, and one of them being a quarterback and not getting one back. So yeah, like I agree with your evaluation of it.
Yep. No, and I thank you for the additional commentary. I think you're right. I don't think that the natural process would be wrong if this was just an ordinary league. I think the nuance makes it significantly worse, though. What about you, Billy? What's your worst trade of 2024?
I thought you were going to ask me my opinion. I was like, I just gave it to you.
No.
Okay. You're like, what about you, Billy? What do you think? So my worst trade of 2024, I honestly, like, going through this process in general made me think 2 things. I made too many bad trades this year, and I didn't make enough trades in general this year. Like, going through it, like, I was just like, oh, wow, I thought I made more trades in this league, or I thought I made more trades in this league, or whatever it was. So, yeah, just from a high level overview of kind of my trade history over this year, not very happy with it. So there was a lot to pick from. I could have gone to the Console Wars one where I moved way too many assets for a quarterback. That one feels really bad still, but this one kind of stings quite a bit from our League of Legends. McLaurin plus 2 seconds for Tank Dell plus a 4th, just getting way too cute. Like, that I don't even know another way to really say it. Like, I'm trying to think I'm way smarter than everybody. That Dell is going to pan out that much that I'm going to give up basically McLaurin and, what essentially equals a 1st for Dell. Like, the logic, I can't even really get there, going back and trying to put myself in that time frame, So, it just feels like just getting too cute, giving up way too much for an asset that I like, not an asset that is worth what I'm giving up what I'm giving up for. So, yeah, I think that's one where I let my like player bias, like my, me liking a guy plus, thinking I'm smarter than everybody, get in the way of making a good move or not making a move at all, which is what I should have done, is just hold that side. So, any thoughts, Jake or Uriah?
I bet you were pretty happy to get that 4th back at the time, huh?
Wow. Yeah, it's one of the best comments you could have made, I'm sure. Yeah, at the time, I'm like, wow, idiot. Giving me something back, you fucking dummy. But no, yeah, like, it's...
Sorry.
The fourth makes it look worse almost. Like, just without the fourth. Fuck it.
Yeah. But yeah, I got nothing. It sucks. It happens. I mean, honestly, and we didn't know McLaurin was going to have like a career year this year, right? You probably thought you were getting out on an aging wide receiver and an unknown offense, but it's still
kind of. But it's also like this is the first time McLaurin has had a QB ever, and it's like we all kind of like I know myself. I'm like I remember saying back then in general, this guy he can pass the ball. Like that's one thing he can do. He can pass the fucking ball. Like we know he's a runner and everything, but this guy is accurate and he can sling it. And it's like the first time McLaurin finally gets a quarterback that they, draft real high, they are going to believe in, give a chance. And I'm like, yeah, let's ship him off for the injured guy who just got shot. It's like it just the process doesn't really add up. You know what I mean? Even if you like Dell, it's overvaluing an asset because you liked him kind of, or because he was like your rookie darling and you loved how he ran routes and all that, and he worked out, and you're like, he's going to be the best on the team. But it's like there was too many ifs involved in that, when it's just you may as well sit with the question mark, quote unquote, that is McLaurin, but he has a pretty good chance of, we've already seen him play well, has a good chance of hitting with this quarterback, plus just keep your 2 goddamn seconds. Like, yeah, it was just pretty poor trade by me. So I'll definitely keep that one in mind as I go forward into the future.
Yeah. What about you, Raya?
Yeah. What you got?
Just had to think about ones that can hit me. Just shout out for trading Clear Shakir for 4th when I thought I was getting Shakir.
I forgot about that.
I'm just gonna leave that one alone. It's all right. I did the right thing and I didn't try to reverse it. But
you did. You ate it.
In the Florida Boys League, I had realized, hey, I must have just drafted poorly. My team is doing terribly, and I liked it when I drafted, and I haven't done anything to change it, but things are going south real bad. So early on, I realized, hey, I'm tanking this year. This is what it is. And so I think I put that out there in the chat, was like, hey, come get some pieces. And the first offer I got, I just kind of woke up and I saw it was, hey, Ayuk, which I was like, okay, I'm gonna get Ayuk because he's injured and it's all gravy, right? Like his points won't matter for me. And 2/3 for Flowers. I was like, all right, I like Flowers, but I was this was still pretty early on, and the Baltimore offense wasn't quite doing as well as it was at the time, or as it is now. And so Flowers wasn't exactly going off. And I thought it was decent enough trade. Hey, he gets Flowers. It's a good player for him for the rest of the year. I got Ayuk, put him on my IR, puts a couple thirds. I'm good to go. Next year, we reboot. But I I still think that's pretty bad based on age and just how much better I think Flowers can be than Ayuk at this point in their careers. I think I could have done better. I think I could have got a better player or more assets for Flowers than I did by getting Ayuk in 2/3.
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, I don't think it's the worst trade. Probably the best trade of the worst trades that we just talked about, honestly.
By far.
Yeah, but I do see where you're coming from.
I mean, you guys probably search my history and find worse, but that's kind of the one that stuck with me. I shouldn't have done that.
No, it's all down. It's all down to your own perspective. I agree with Billy. I don't think that the actual process here is really that bad when you think about what you were trying to do. It honestly is going to potentially get you the 101 in this league. Funny enough, I think if you would have had Flowers on your team, you probably finish at the 102. So what's that gap between those two spots? It could be pretty heavy depending on how you view the two players that are going to be 101, 102. This is going to be a conversation that's coming up right after this, so let's not have that conversation. But
20 points.
But it's for me, you still get a relatively elite asset when Ayuk is healthy. I fully expect him to be healthy for start of season next year, and you get 2/3 on top of it. I don't think you're really losing out that much in terms of points. I don't even know if this league is going to last more than 3 years, to be completely honest, with some of the bullshit that goes on in the league chat. So who knows? Who knows?
Oh, I think it will. We only have 1 or 2 bad eggs in that league, and every league has a couple of them. But listen, they've paid ahead, so they're in for a bit. That's for sure. I think the problem children have paid more future dues than anybody. So yeah, but that's I agree with Jake. Like overall, like I don't think you really lost on this one, but I get why it feels like the worst right now for sure, because you're giving up an asset that's valued in like the top 50 for one that's like, outside the top like 70 or so, but still he's IU can rise back up, but you probably should have been able to get maybe like a second instead, or maybe something, maybe even a little bit more than a second or a couple more pieces but they got you at the right time. Flowers wasn't, like you said, showing out necessarily, but anyway, I don't think it's the worst trade to have as your worst. So you could take solace in knowing that we are doing worse than you with our worst.
Exactly.
But go ahead, Jake. What do you got for your best?
No, I was actually going to say, you're right. You hit us off with your best because you just hit us with your worst. So
my best, it's not like a blockbuster. I don't really do a lot of blockbuster trades. In fact, the one I made today I thought was pretty good too. But yeah, this one is just because the process. Billy and I were on here, him and I together, and we were talking about Hollywood's value. And we were talking about some other players that like, hey, do we want to go get them? And I'm not as KTC, I'm not on there as often as you guys are, right? So the fact that Hollywood Brown's value had fallen as far as I had, and he was injured, right? And that's the league where I'm trying to tank. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go before we record next week. I'm gonna acquire Hollywood Brown. Like if he's that cheap right now, yeah, I definitely want him. So immediately after we got done off the pod, I sent Romeo Dubs over for Hollywood Brown and a third. I had like 70% plus rostership of Romeo Dubs. So it's kind of one of those guys that like you don't want to be left holding all the bag. So get rid of one of my many shares. And yeah, I just felt good. It felt like it's one of those where we sit here and we talk and say we're going to do something or should do something where I actually did exactly what I said I was going to do. And I just felt great about it. It's like one of those trades that like I felt really, really good about it. I don't think I won necessarily. I think I won based on like put my money where my mouth is and still looking at it like that wasn't a bad deal at all. I think it's going to work out for me just fine.
It's a good trade. I think this process is awesome. I think the process is even better when you think about how you actually like worked through it, which is you hosted this podcast, you took the information from the podcast, you then processed it, and then you said, I'm going to send out trades. Because sometimes I really do think that the conversations that we have, or even some of the points that our listeners bring up while we're either talking or even in the Discord, I take that information all the time and I will send out a trade offer. I'm like, damn, that's a really great idea. And it's funny enough, I am going to talk about that literally for one of my best trades. So I highly recommend that. And the second thing I will say is that the Hollywood Brown situation is so unique because I think he's actually going to come back into this Kansas City team in such a great part of the year where you might be able to quickly flip him, even if you don't want him for next season because you don't know where he's going to land, that he might actually reacquire some of his starting value from not even the beginning of this season, but probably the beginning of this season, going into the Chiefs team, right? Like everyone was so excited about that transition for him in his career, but knowing that the contract's so short, if he does have a really good NFL playoffs with the team, that could be a great window for you to get out on. And you just basically got, who knows, an early second and a third for Romeo Dobbs, which is not anything you were probably ever going to get close to for him. So, yeah, I think it's a great trade.
Yeah, I love the process of both, it coming from the pod, but also, you being a rebuilding team, this helping by getting the points off, this helping by adding value down the road. Like it's just all encompassing, I think. It makes sense. This is your best trade or a candidate for a best trade because just the way that it was executed kind of from the inception of it to the execution of it. So I really like that one. I'm going to cheat a little bit here. I'm going to go off script because I do think I have better than what I put on here. Though trading a second for Kelsey, which is what I put on here, I think is definitely good work. And I did it at a point before he blew up and became worth like 2 seconds, right? And so I felt like it was just like an opportune trade. It was getting on it like right when I saw that like he had dipped and just believing obviously that he was going to come back to form as the season went on. So that was kind of the idea on the Kelsey one. That was pretty easy. But I have a rebuilding team where I just feel like every move I made was so like catered toward the rebuild, and it all kind of as a series made a lot of sense. So there was 3 trades that happened. 2 of them were like within a week of each other in October. The other one was quite a ways back in June, but they're pretty easy to go through. So I'll just say the 3, but I think all of them would be candidates for like best trade, but as a series feels really good given that the team is rebuilding. So it was giving up Jalen Warren way back in June for the 205 in 24. So getting an early second for Warren. Then in October, moving Hubbard, Wandale Robinson, and a 26th third for Rashee Rice. So getting a bunch of points off my team and also getting a high end asset, that will likely approach, top 12-ish wide receiver value next season. And then about a week later, giving up Andy Dalton and Noah Fant for a 25 second.
Yes.
Right. And so I think just like all of those combined are just like the perfect example of, I feel like, understanding where a team is at and just making consistent steps in the direction of rebuilding, and all of them being worthwhile, making sense for the build, and getting you, actually kind of taking you to a actionable place where you can continue to do more. And so those felt really good as a sequence for my best trade.
Yeah, I think process-wise, especially when you think of them as a sequence, it just makes so much sense logically. I still don't understand how you got that second trade done, but that's okay. Some people were completely out on Rashi. Some people are still out on Rashi. They think that he's going to miss a large portion of next year. So I get it, I guess, from that regard. But from an acquisition perspective, like that's when and how you acquire those types of assets. And if the window's open, you take advantage of them. So yeah, bravo.
All right. Finish it off, Jake. What about your best trades?
Yeah. It seems like rebuilding really gets you into good situations for trades. My last 2 trades are on the same team, Console Wars, 36 team, 3 copy league. Jordan Addison and Jordan Mason, the 2 Jordans. 2 Jordans, 1 Brian Thomas Jr. Sorry, that's not right. So I found myself really wanting to get off the Jordan Mason hype. And at the time, Christian McCaffrey
tried so hard.
I was literally trying everything. I was at a point where I was willing to sell this dude who was scoring close to 20 points per game for a second. I was like, this guy is going to change your season. I promise. Yes, his points will fall off at a certain point, but like
snake oil salesman,
but he will help you. And then finally Addison hit a small window of like performing very, very well. And he still actually is performing pretty well. He's not good. He's not terrible, but he's like doing well. And Brian Thomas Jr. was dealing with the situation of Trevor Lawrence getting injured. So I thought that there was a good chance for me to take advantage of that situation. So I sent out a trade and it got accepted immediately. So that felt really good. And then in the same league, talking about learning from the people around you, shout out to Tommy Blair. He posed the idea of, would you trade JJ McCarthy for Deshaun Watson? And I said, I would actually trade JJ McCarthy for Deshaun Watson, but I only have Deshaun Watson. I don't have any JJ McCarthy. Let me try and go get JJ McCarthy. I thought it made sense. I was already relatively exposed to Deshaun because I was able to acquire him for really cheap. Now I know why.
Dangerous situation being exposed to Deshaun.
Oh yeah. Now I'm gosh. Anyway, so needless to say, I think just the general approach to the team itself and like where the team was going made a lot of sense actually for this trade to happen. And this was another trade where I sent it out and it was immediately accepted. And I felt like this trade actually made sense for both teams at the time, specifically me in a rebuild. And then I think the next day after the trade went down, JJ McCarthy went on IR. So I didn't feel great about it immediately, but now everyone's on IR, so I feel fantastic.
I mean, yeah.
Yes.
That I was on the opposite end of the same exact trade in a different league, and I hate myself for it. So that could also qualify as my worst trade. But that Brian Thomas Jr. trade for getting him for Addison and Mason is just masterclass stuff. So yeah, chef's kiss. Cannot beat that. And you didn't have much patience with it. I remember you were very antsy to get rid of Mason, but I think the long game worked out well for you. And that is definitely how you should try to get off of players like that for those kind of assets. Just really great stuff.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, you guys exposed yourselves to everyone. I didn't have to expose anything because I don't make mistakes. Okay. My last thing that I added, and the only reason I want to build this up into the show, sorry, Uriah, is because this is a really weird idea, but it's happening between the two of us. So the tanking championship trophy. And this came up because I'm now seeing this in a couple of startups specifically where multiple teams have gone into rebuilds at some point of the startup season and are truly in a tanking competition. Like who can score the least amount of points? And we're talking somewhere sometimes between 1 to even only up to like 15 points differential, where you're looking at week 14 and it is basically a championship of who can shed the most amount of points in that given week to make sure that they get the 101 or the 102. I think it's a really, really unique situation. I've never really seen it. I also don't typically tank. This is probably my first ever productive struggle that I've done from startup. So yeah. Which makes it even more compelling for both of us. But the funniest part about it is that it's Uriah and I up against each other. We're currently 2 points apart. And
there you go. Yeah.
I have.
I'm just gonna start dropping players.
Yeah, literally. You very well could. I have Jaden Daniels on bye, and Uriah has Anthony Richardson on bye, and I want to say like Jonathan Taylor, and then also has the potential likelihood of Breece Hall to be injured this week and not play. So I think I'm going to probably end up losing, even though I'm only 2 points off. The rest of my team I think is a little too good, and I can't really trade away any of those players. But anyway, the question that I have for both of you, just to kind of like learn about the situation a little bit more, is like, is the difference between the 101 and the 102 in the 2020-25 rookie draft significant? Like, how are we thinking about that gap between those two players? Because like when I think back to the 2024 rookie draft, I think a lot of people thought that those two first picks were almost interchangeable depending on who you spoke to, with Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison Jr. And I don't think you'd be saying that today. First off. Second off, do we think that the top 2 picks this year are Janty? Is that how you pronounce his last name? Janty?
I think so. Janty
and Tet McMillan. And like, do we see that as the same kind of dichotomy?
I mean, I think that there's actually a pretty big gap between Genty and Tet, and I like Tet quite a bit, honestly. But I think the talent that we're seeing from Genty is just kind of otherworldly in comparison, I think, to anybody else in this draft. And so I think that the gap is significant. That said, like, am I willing to do crazy things to get myself to 101 instead of 102? Not really. Like, I kind of think if you're that close and you want to get there, you might be better suited just waiting towards the rookie draft and seeing if you can, add to your 102 and get there that way, instead of trying to, get rid of good players off your team or something like that, and, put yourself in kind of a bad position that way. Like, I've said this before, like, I don't want to, I want to naturally end up there as much as possible. Yes. I want this to be more of an organic process than me shooting myself in the foot to get there, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? And so like, that's what I want to avoid if possible. But I don't know if you have any other thoughts, Uriah.
Oh yeah. Basically what you're saying, like, I'm in this situation with Jake, and I have not done anything actively to get, besides the, regular trades that you'd have, like, okay, picking up an injured player for next year, those types of deals, right?
That makes sense.
Like, yeah. I'm not actively trying to do anything to, like, I don't care if I end up with the 102. Like, I'll be fine with that. If I end up with the 101, I might try to trade down to 102. right? And just take the second best player. Like, I don't think it's that big of a deal. We don't have, in my opinion, like, and it's early, but I don't think we have like, okay, you need the 101 to get the guy. Like, I think
right.
anywhere between 101 and 103, you're going to be pretty good, pretty happy right now. So even if I do end up with the 101, I don't foresee myself actually selecting at the 101. So I'm not really doing anything to make it happen. I'm just putting out what I have on my rosters. If something comes up that a contender wants a player off my team, I'm sure as shit gonna accommodate them. But I'm not gonna make any crazy moves to beat Jake to be the worst. No.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. And it's funny you say that because I don't think I was ever really thinking about the competition of max PF between us, but I definitely was conscientious of points that I didn't want on my roster long term, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So like
absolutely.
Tyrone Tracy is a really good example of that. Like he was someone on my roster that I thought I could find a way to get into a first round pick if I tried my fucking damnedest. And I did. I finally did it. And that's probably one of the best traits that I have in this dumb game is that I am fucking relentless with selling players. And so I sent Demario Douglas, Tyrone Tracy, and a third for a 26th first and a 25th fourth. And like that was a way for me to shed points. But like the reality is that I probably did that too late. Looking at it, the same thing with like Will Dissly, right? Like I had Will Dissly on my team probably like 2 or 3 weeks too long, and I probably could have sold him for a fourth, or who knows what I could have sold him for earlier. It probably would have been as lucrative, but I ended up getting like a 27th third or something like that. Like it's not great, and like little things like that probably could have made the difference here because we are talking about individual points, but I guess the secondary question that I did have is that do we think that there's a chance for, a high-end drafted quarterback to sneak into the conversation in a super flex paradigm where I don't think a lot of people are talking about that right now? Like, do we see a Shadur Sanders or a Cam Ward or even a Jalen Milroe who could probably be, put into the same conversation of Anthony Richardson in terms of, growth and development, while he's, looked the way he has in college, moving up into either the 102 or 103 range that kind of changes the way in which we're valuing these early picks.
Yeah, I'm sure Shador can, and maybe even Cam, those two could probably get up there in like the 103, 104, 105 range. I mean, in Superflex, it's like it has to happen with a quarterback, right? But I have not felt very encouraged by what I've seen out of any of these guys to think that it's going to happen in a meaningful way. But that said, I don't think that means we shouldn't be interested in them. I think if they're going to fall towards the end of the first and early second, it's like Bo Nix all over again. As long as they get like the draft capital, or as long as a couple of these guys end up in the first round, that kind of thing, and even early second, then if we're getting that kind of value in the second round, if we have the early second littered with these quarterbacks, like, please, that'd be great. Like, I'll take that kind of value all day in that range, because you usually don't get it there. And not that, that increases their level of talent or anything. But, I mean, this could totally be like the Kenny Pickett draft all over again, like that year, which would be terrible. So you got to be cautious. But even Pickett had, quite a few off ramps and quite a long leash in terms of dynasty value. So I think still kind of holds the theory there. But I don't think that many are going to get up into that 103 area. I think it's going to be honestly more like the mid first, and it'll be like one or two of them at most. Probably like something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to say I disagree, because I agree with basically what you're saying, but if I see a rookie draft consistently go running back, wide receiver, running back, or whatever, and a quarterback isn't selected until 103 or 104, that'll be the first time I've seen that consistently since I started playing Dynasty. So in Superflex, I believe, whether we like it or not, we don't really have any like blue chip quarterbacks in our opinions at this point in time, but I just believe that the nature of the quarterback in Superflex, I think we'll be seeing the first quarterback taken 101 and 102.
You're talking about in the
Fair.
NFL draft?
No, I'm talking about rookie drafts.
Yeah, because I do think in the NFL draft, you're going to see teams are going to be significantly more desperate, I think, than in the past with regards to talent valuation. And I think that that's going to have a significant impact because, like, when you compare that to Kenny Pickett being drafted in the 20s, I think it was.
Yeah, like 21 or something.
Yeah. And compared to, probably getting, knowing the Giants will probably select a quarterback at 102, 103, and it will probably be either the second or first quarterback off the board. I don't see how in Dynasty Superflex you're going to see that player drop further than that. Like, I don't see how that player falls out of 103. Like, it's probably going to be 102, regardless of whatever we think of the talent itself. I just think that there's a strong correlation between those two things. And that's why I brought it up, because I agree with you, Billy, by all means. I don't believe in the talent myself. I just think that the game is predicated also on so much of the work that's being done in the NFL. And if these organizations, no matter how good or bad they are, we believe that they know what they're doing. Some people do. I don't believe that the Giants know what they're doing, but yeah.
No, I mean, it's a great point. I just don't like, I'd be shocked if one of those guys gets picked that high. I mean, I can see one going later towards the top 10 and then another one after that later in the first round. Like, that's kind of how I foresee it. And that's why I think I only see one of those guys kind of even reaching the potential of getting up there. I'd be shocked. And the only one I can really see sitting there at 102 and getting taken is Sanders, honestly. But maybe I'm, maybe you guys are right and the dynamic has shifted and these teams are desperate and they're going to reach up in there like they did with Bo Nix and Penix, and it'll be a few guys up in the top 15 again. And if that's the case, then I will be wrong for sure.
And the only other thing I would note is that when you think of specifically 4 of the top 7, actually 5 of the top 8 teams, right? Or by top, I mean worst. It's Vegas at 2 right now. They need technically a quarterback. Yeah. The Giants at 3, the Jets at 6, the Titans at 7. You could see them going either direction depending on how Will Levis finishes out the season. And then we really have no idea what the Cleveland Browns are going to do at 8. There's a possibility that at least two quarterbacks get drafted in the top 8 picks, depending on obviously how things play out for the rest of the season. I know that, we still have another, 4 weeks left. So I'm just saying it seems like a situation where depending on what happens, and maybe teams just trade out. Like maybe the Giants, if they're smart, they trade out of a top 2 pick for someone who's moving up for D end or the next Saquon Barkley, whatever, only the Giants could do that. Like, I think that that's probably more the reality, but how many of those teams, like I said, there's so many teams that are quarterback needy that I do find that there'll probably be multiple teams that take a quarterback in the top 10 picks. And that's probably the sad reality.
It's fair. And yeah, it is a sad reality.
Yeah. Yeah. But okay. Well, to everyone who is competing for their tanking championship trophy this week, best of luck, except to you, Uriah. I hope you score so many points this week. Score all of the points.
I accidentally won Console Wars this week. That's Cherry Judy. I'll let you guys finish off with these trades and non-trades.
All right.
Well, all right. Thanks for listening. Y'all have a good night. I'll be here next week.
Awesome. Take it easy, brother. All right, so let's knock it out with a couple trades here. I'm gonna probably throw one in at the end that's not on the sheet, but let's do it. Bucky Irving for 26 first. 26 first for me. Sorry, I didn't really need to think about it that long. But
you were thinking about it. It felt like forever.
Yeah, I just kind of just taking it all in. Yeah, 26 first going away pretty easy there. I just it's funny. I'm glad this is brought up here because I do think Bucky has looked really good. Like we were giving, Dynasty Zoltan a bunch of shit for having him as his, RB1 of the class. And that's not looking the worst necessarily as a take. But I just still think that he is not like, it's tough because I don't want to do the like, oh, he's too small type thing, but I just feel like he doesn't pack the punch necessary for an every down player to sustain the kind of success that he's showing in his rookie season. And maybe that's like a short, a small-minded view of kind of, you know, just size and running back position, you know, being too small kind of thing. Like I you know, probably shouldn't do that to players because like we have seen them overcome that. And yeah, AJ, AK, you think he's too small? Yeah, kind of think he's too small to be an every down running back. And so I always think that he'll be capped at some level. And so I think whatever player you're getting in the first is going to be a higher caliber player with greater potential overall. And so that's kind of really what it comes down to. I think Bucky's clearly a better player than we thought he was, but still not worth a first, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think that makes plenty of sense. And I put this here in parentheses, playoff push. I do think that this is a move that a lot of contenders would consider making because you're getting a relatively young running back. I think that this is probably his relative market price. Maybe some folks are probably charging a late 25 first. I actually like this idea of going for the 26 first. I don't know if you've heard through our tone of voice. Not a huge fan of the 2025 class personally yet. Maybe that'll change over the next few months. But I do think that your likelihood, if you know that this team is going to contend relatively strongly in 2025, the likelihood for them to contend as well. Sorry. You know, they're contending in 2024, meaning that their 2025 pick is relatively high.
Late,
the likelihood of them being able to recontend the following year, depending on their other moves, is probably relatively low. So being able to capitalize off them trading away that future draft capital makes a lot of sense to me. And in this situation, it was a productive struggle / rebuilding team. I think calling it productive struggle is probably being too polite. But this being a rebuilding team, retooling team, it made a lot of sense. So yeah, I agree. It's the 26 first on both sides. Like I would be trying to get a 26 first if I was contending or if I was rebuilding. I don't want Bucky Irving for that price.
For sure. I agree. Okay, so is this Brock Purdy and the 211 for Baker? Like that's, I forgot what league this happened in, but that is, to me, it's fairly easily Brock Purdy and the 211. It's like a free 211. So that's kind of how I view it. Like I understand that the 49ers are going through a rough patch here, but I just think none of it is on Purdy. It's not going to fall on Purdy. As long as the team kind of gets right in any sort of form or fashion, like health-wise and going into next year. I mean, they have a lot of aging assets, don't get me wrong. Things are going to change there. He's going to get Brandon Ayuk back, though. They're going to have a healthy running back core of sorts, probably with CMC, to be honest, again, who will be, you know, old, but there. I just think things are going to turn a little bit for Brock Purdy. And either way, even if they didn't, he's so young and none of this is on him. Like, he's looked good in bad situations. And not in bad situations, but while the team has played poorly, he's still looked pretty good. And this goes back to like any time the team has played poorly, he's always still looked pretty good. So I love me some Baker, don't get me wrong, but I just think you're getting a free asset with the second round pick here.
Yeah, I agree. And this is one of those players that, like, I always think of players that have positive connotations, or I think that the general public likes.
Yeah.
I think Brock Purdy has a positive connotation to him, whereas I think that Baker, for whatever reason, he's always going to have the sour grapes attached to his name. And if I can get off of that asset and get a second for what I think is in market, probably relatively similar, like I feel like that's a smash on the Purdy side, and I voted as such, and the deal got done. And to Uriah's point before, which he was alluding to, this could be one of his best trades that he's made in 2024. Like, I do think that this is a really good trade for him.
Oh, this was Console Wars. Okay, that's
yes.
what I pushed through. Yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic trade. I can't believe this got done. Like, I get it. Like, the idea, I think, would be, I didn't look at the teams. I'm just assuming based on the trade that, like, he needs more consistent or more, like, guaranteed points, where, like, right now, Brock Purdy and the 49ers are just like a shaky situation, so you're not getting high end scoring. But yeah, I'm surprised that it took a second to get it done. But either way, yeah, really good trade from Uriah there, and yeah, I think the thing you mentioned about players having positive stigmas to them, or a good connotation with their name, or a positive perception in the community, like that matters. And it's just simply that Brock Purdy is the was he Mr. Irrelevant, all that stuff. He has like this comeback kid thing about him. Plus he's just good and likable. And that carries, I think, over in value in the dynasty community as well, especially in comparison to a guy like Baker, who it feels like any moment the bottom could fall out with him, where it doesn't feel like that with Purdy. So very good point there. Okay. JSN plus Isaac Guerrero for Garrett Wilson plus Cam Akers. This is a weird trade. We are on, I'll say exactly, or almost verbatim what I said to Jake in the text. I feel like this should be JSN, but that's just like a wild place for us to be at. And so like, it's just weird. This hinges very little on the Isaac Guerrero versus Cam Akers portion of this, but just more on, I mean, obviously Guerrero is a better asset than Cam Akers, so that also favors the JSN side. But I just feel like these are very similar assets, JSN and Garrett Wilson, in terms of what they're going to offer you in Dynasty, both in longevity and production. And I just kind of like what JSN offers more as a player. Like, I think he's more of a steady player. He's going to have a higher floor, but offer a similar ceiling as well. And so like his situation is better, even though he's not the JSN's not the outright number one on his team right now. Over time, I think that could still happen, where, DK could be phased out or moved to another team eventually or whatever it is. And he is more the Garrett Wilson role that Garrett Wilson is on the Jets. But either way, I think they're still going to score similar points, because Garrett Wilson honestly isn't nearly as consistent or still as refined as JSN is as a wide receiver. And that's translating into not as many points as you'd expect from Garrett Wilson, and more points than you would typically expect from like the role that JSN is playing right now on his team compared to Garrett Wilson, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. This is honestly a really tough offer for me to have worked through. I actually ended up countering this offer with, instead of Akers, it was Isaiah Likely. I was just trying to get a slight bit more upside. And I also just liked that the second asset felt like it had some future sense to it. This just feels like a literal throw in. I was trying to find something that made a little bit more sense for my build, and I was willing to kind of take the loss on JSN versus Wilson in the short run, hoping that things do kind of come right. But that was unfortunately a little too steep for the person who sent the offer, and so things kind of fizzled. It's one of those weird ones, because I posted this trade in a bunch of different Discords, and in some it went like 50-50 to both sides. And then in others, it was unanimous. Like one was like 15-2 Garrett Wilson and Akers side. And it's just so interesting, because I do think that the market altogether is really, really split on Garrett Wilson right now. I myself have always had kind of a crush on him. And so I found this particularly challenging, but I also like JSN. Like, if it was up to me, I would want both of those assets on that same team. But that wasn't feasible with the way that the negotiations were going. But yeah, this was a difficult one, but I don't think this is going to be one that I'll be upset about missing out on. I think this is just kind of a wash, and I needed a push in another direction for me to actually get this done. So it's unfortunate, but it was a good trade. It was a really awesome trade offer to begin with. And I did post this in the Superflex Super Shows Discord. Shout out to them. And I love that Tommy B responded directly to it. He goes, "I love whoever proposed this trade. It reeks of potential underlying strategies that may not be visible to us right now." And I think that's 100% accurate. I don't think I really understood kind of where the trade was coming from outside of like a point scoring perspective over the next several weeks going into playoffs. And so I also just felt kind of uneasy by it. And I didn't feel like the value necessarily made sense because I thought that I was maybe giving up too much point scoring value for a playoff team without getting, that refined kind of value back for a rebuilding team. And so that's kind of where things sat. They unfortunately didn't improve, but yeah. Anyway, I thought it was a cool trade. So shout out to who sent it to me. I won't shout you out, but it was a fun one.
I like that the underlying strategies that may not be showing themselves thing, and when it makes you feel uneasy like that, I feel like you shouldn't do the trade, if that makes sense. Like you should find a different way to get it done, or a different route, or at least take some more time to think on what's going on here, because you may be missing something. And so, or it may just be too close where it's like, why would we do this? And it just didn't, I don't think it makes that much sense necessarily. Post CMC trade. Yes, that was a post CMC trade. So Garendo carried that extra value. Before we finish off here, I just had one more I'm working through, trying to move on from Jerry Jeudy. Kind of weird. It's funny. It goes back to the conversation we were talking about, where heading into the playoffs, like, what are some moves you'd make? And like, I just feel like my team doesn't have the juice to get through the top contenders in this league, even though I'm going to make the playoffs. And I'm like, well, let me see if I can move off of Jerry Jeudy on this team and get some future value, like, churn a player who just is kind of an inconsistent dynasty asset. And so I'm looking at the player in first place, and he's interested. And so there's a couple options there where it seemed like maybe Will Levis is an option, but not exactly sure how that, if it would just be 1-for-1, if I would want to do that. He has like a mid-second, and he's like, we're trying to come to some agreement here. Would you trade Jerry Jeudy for a mid-second straight?
I think I'm definitely in the minority here, and I would, but I think you could get more than that.
Right.
I think that's the reality of, especially his last 4 or 5 week window at Jameis. Looking at that, I think has changed people's perspectives, and then you put out basically like a career defining game. I think it really changes people's perception. So yeah, I think if you can get a second and a third, I'd probably be fine with it. I think even if you had Will Levis, I'd probably still want a third on top of Will Levis, maybe an early fourth, something like that. But I definitely would want additional value, because I kind of have Will Levis sitting there in around the same range, to be honest. He's probably at like a 203 for me right now, 202. So I would need something a little bit more on top.
Yeah, I was trying to find a way to add something to Jeudy to get Levis and the second. Which I tried to add Keenan Allen, thinking like Keenan's points plus. Jeudy might get the juices flowing, but Keenan's not a very enticing piece. Like, how would you feel comfortable throwing like AD Mitchell in there, or Ricky Pearsall in there, and Jerry Jeudy for Levis in a second? I mean, okay, so at least that's a conversation piece. This is kind of where that's at.
Yeah, I think I would be more interested in sending AD Mitchell.
Yeah.
And I personally like AD Mitchell more as a profile than Ricky Pearsall. But yeah, I just think being on Indy with Anthony Richardson, he is capped.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think Jeudy, off the back of these successful performances, and then having that revenge game, it just feels like you should get near first round value for him, even though I know going from third to first round value, basically that shift it just doesn't feel right. Doesn't equate, doesn't square. So like, it's less than a first, obviously, but it's so damn close that I feel like a second just doesn't cut it. A mid-second just doesn't cut it for me. So I think it's a good one to talk through, considering a lot of people are probably in similar positions, whether trading for or trying to trade him away. he looks good, man. He looks good in this situation, but you also have Jameis Winston spamming targets through crazy windows that could be picked off any second. Like, this just isn't how it's going to be in a normal functioning offense. And so I don't think we can expect it going forward. And that's why I'm willing to move off of Jerry Jeudy. I just don't think this is who he is now and for the future. So
yeah. I agree, unfortunately. But yeah, no, I think it's a really good trade process situation. I think this is exactly when you want to be getting off of these assets, and it's tough because you want to squeeze out value as much as you can, but
don't
it
want to
does
miss your window.
exactly.
Yeah.
And that's how I feel specifically in console wars 95% of the time, is like, if I don't get this trade done in the next, that was the reason with Jordan Mason, right? Like, I was literally spamming offers because I knew that as soon as a CMC news has hit and people were aware of when he was coming back, whenever it might have been, that I basically had a useless asset on my team that was scoring points. And like I said, I'm a rebuilding team. I wanted to have as low of potential points as possible. So yeah, it's a really tough situation, but I think you're doing the right process. And I think you have a couple more days that I think you can get this type of deal done.
All right. I like that encouragement. That's what we're going to work on. We got some homework from some DU homework that we will report back with next week. But for this one, that's going to do it for us. Thanks, Jake, as always, for being here. Uriah as well. Everybody, I should have said this out at the outset, at the top, but everybody hop into Discord if you're not there yet. Find your way in there. Hop on Twitter or Blue Sky at Willie Beeman FF, and you can hit me up and I'll get you in there, get you an invite. But the invites are all over our Twitter for Dynasty Underdog. I probably got to create a fucking Blue Sky account for that. Anyway, all right. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. Follow us on Twitter at Dynasty Underdog, at Uriah Dawkins, at Jake Abrams, and at Willie Beeman FF. That's all for us. Peace out, fam. Take it easy.